What emotions like
My brother, mentor, pastor, life coach, all the things above, Mr. Dave Gibbons. And we're discussing some interesting topics. Both of us happen to be authors. Congratulations on your new book, The Shape of My Eyes. I'm into it deep right now. I got about 6 more chapters to go.
wow.
Learning a lot about you, um, a lot about your life. And it's crazy because everybody has a different path,
Hmm.
but it's so interesting how it's kind of all the same.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I was telling you when we sat down that I was on the chapter about your father
Hmm.
and about your dad and your mom's relationship, which I had the same thing with my dad and my mom,
Yeah.
which is interesting because I remember being a young kid and not really understanding what was going on in my family dynamic
Yeah.
and hearing the word divorce and being like, okay, what's that?
Right.
What happens next?
Yeah.
And I felt like that we was like this unit. We had this family, and it's crazy because even like with your sister, she was like my sister's my little sister,
Hmm.
but she's like my little big sister.
Yeah. Right.
And just hearing that dynamic. And then I had an older brother, but he passed,
Okay.
right? So to kind of see that we are like more ways than one was very interesting. And
Hmm. Yeah.
what I really liked is how you had the process, just the fact that you guys wasn't going to be a unit anymore. And I remember when I was younger, I was processing it, but I didn't truly understand that. So my thing would be like, how did you? Because even now I can't recall
Yeah.
how you recall that. So how did you go back to that moment and actually write those emotions and those details with it being so far, from where you are now?
The traumas that we go through seem to be imprinted in our soul,
Mm,
and I think I didn't process it that deeply when I was younger.
okay.
You know how as you get older, you just tell your story, and it's that perspective you've always had of that moment as a child or as a teenager, maybe.
Mm,
But writing the book is really healing for me because I had to sit in that scene
mm-hmm.
because, when you're writing like a memoir like you have,
Yep.
you get into the skin of the people in that room or in that setting,
Mm,
and you're trying to feel what they feel, see what they see, so you
mm,
can write that so the audience can be there. And so because of that, instead of me just kind of just telling my story as a kid or a teenager, I sat it and I circled the room.
right.
And I just started remembering all the colors or the scene and the emotions I felt. And I just went deep dive into it.
Mm.
And it was really helpful for me.
Yo, it's crazy you say that because like when I wrote my memoir,
Yeah.
um, I wrote it from a place of integrity because I just wanted to be fair. I didn't want to be the hero,
Right.
but I couldn't remember the colors,
Yeah.
but I can remember the feeling.
Hmm.
And you're absolutely right about having to like sit in it. It was very therapeutic for me because it was like a lot of trauma
Yeah.
and things that I had went through.
Yeah.
I kind of, pushed them to the side and just went on with my life.
Yeah.
For writing my memoir, I had to actually like come face to face with it.
Mm.
I had a great friend of mine who was probably the reason why that I'm even where I'm at now because he made sure that I got signed to Def Jam. His name was Shakir Stewart.
Hmm.
Very charismatic guy. Every time you saw him,
Yeah.
he just had the energy. Everybody loved him. But he ended up taking his own life. And when I had to write that, I kind of skimmed over it because I didn't want to deal with it.
Right.
But then when I had to read the book for the audiobook, that's when it hit me. That's when I was just like, oh, wow, like you ain't really sat down and lived with this. Like you haven't dealt with this. And it was therapeutic for me because once I read it, once I took the time to process it and do some do some healing and some work, um, I realized that this is something that I needed to deal with. And it helped me out a lot because it was like just a bag of bricks being lifted off my back, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What emotions like came that were new to you? What were you feeling when you went deep?
I meant hurt, confusion,
Because
um, pain. You know, something that I was able to like self-soothe so much, you know what I mean? Because like now, of course, back then I was self-soothing because I was, drinking, partying and going through the most. So I had distractions, right? And nowadays a lot less distractions, and I just had to sit with it, but it felt good to, and you say it all the time. It's just like, when you said it, you say your biggest wound would be your biggest,
Greatest calling.
your greatest calling. Yeah. And for me, it was just like, I sat in the pain. I dealt with it. I processed it. I came to grips with it. I forgave, him. I forgave myself for the whole, just kind of having resentment. Right. And then I was at peace with it. But it's something that needed to happen.
What would you, like, as an older man now, looking back at, how old were you then?
I'd be like 28 now.
Okay, so let's say you're older now, you're looking back at this younger man and you're meeting him again. What would you tell yourself after that situation?
Have grace, but also to check on your strong friends, right? And to check in, like, cause even now with my tribe, we got this group text that we all on it, and it's just like we all updating each other with what's going on in our lives, and somebody might have an issue. I think that's important because, you just have to check in, and community is real. Like just having somebody there, and I ask people all the time, like we had these conversations, like, do you want me to just listen? Do you want me to give you my opinion, or do you want to hear what I think, or do you want me to agree with you? Because I can do that too. We talk about it later on. But I think that that's very important because, especially in the Black community, like we don't really have like a lot of outlets, right? It's for Black men. Let me say that, because a lot of Black women have friends and they confide in them and they tell them things, and that's just the way women are wired. But with men, we like hold everything in. But it's surprising to me. I had one of my friends, great friend, I love him, and I couldn't really. So he lost a son, right? And then the next week he had a son. So his oldest son died, right? And I think it was an illness. It might have been kidney or something like that. And in the same week he had a son, right? And the way I could only process it, and I couldn't say that to him, but in my mind, I'm like, why would God take someone and then, but the only way I can process it is, because I wanted to be there for him, right? But the only way that I can process it is he's such a great person, and like he does so much for the community, so much for kids, so much for people. He's one of those friends, you call him, he's there, that I feel like God wouldn't take something from you without giving you something, and that's the way that I processed it. But having to have that conversation, going to the funeral and just being there and just knowing that, this is something I couldn't even imagine, right? I'm talking about friends that I lost. You're talking about a child. But it was just so important because going through this process, even his wife told me, she's like, I'm really glad he has the type of friends that he has now, because, we was all there for him. We all rallied around him. We kept him in good spirits. We had late night conversations with him, just whatever he needed to go through that process. And my younger self, there was nobody there to, it's kind of like if you complain, people are looking at you like, but you're rich, but you're successful. Like, why are you complaining about life?
Right.
But I think now, just having a community and having a tribe has helped me a lot. So I would tell my younger self, for sure, just to keep good people around you.
That's really good.
Right.
Yeah, I heard someone say, like, the opposite of addiction is connection.
Wow.
And then, like, the opposite of even fear is love.
Explain that.
Well, a lot of times you think the opposite of fear is maybe boldness, courage.
Right.
But actually, I remember in the scriptures, there's a verse that says, perfect love casts out fear.
Right.
And so I said, oh, then that may be like the opposite of of what fear is, because if you really feel loved and you are loving others, because it's not just like receiving love, but it's giving love.
Right.
It's a fullness to that that seems to erase the fear. It's not that fear is completely gone. I don't think that's realistic.
Right.
To be fearless.
Right.
But you can become courageous. The more you understand how much you're loved. I don't know if there's a greater thing to understand as a human in terms of like the connection you can have with a higher power as well as like with your people.
Right.
But yeah, I think when you feel loved, you feel like you can almost do anything.
Right.
Right. When you feel your friends are loving you, and they got your back.
People care about you.
You're bolder.
Yeah. You got to support. I mean, it's crazy because for me, like, what I had to understand, like when I used to get mad about things, you don't really realize the fear is coming from being scared about something.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Whether it's you're gonna be scared you're gonna lose everything, or you're scared that this is gonna happen, and you're gonna have to do this or that. And it was just like once I started to understand that and peel back the layers, because it's funny you say like even with trauma, like once I started to like identify what things was triggering me, and I was able to deal with them head up, it just it opened up the door for love, right? Because the way I'm used to like, and I think a lot of people that come from where I come from, we're programmed to move out of scarcity. Yeah. Right. And once you get out of that, like once you get out of the mode of living for survival, and then you get into this mode of living for love, with due process, of course, it's a whole different life. It's like the air is cleaner, the water tastes better.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like it's a different waking up. You wake up and you just feel different.
Yeah. Well, it makes me think about, like, as you talk about trauma, what do you think were like the generational traumas that your family experienced, number one?
Right.
And then number two is, what did you see as a pattern of how your family and yourself dealt with typical traumas?
Okay, I will answer the second question first. I don't think we ever dealt with it. Like what I've seen growing up from my grandmother on my mother's side, in her side of the family, drinking was a social, like it was a thing, right? My grandmother, she probably's like 90 something right now, and she probably recently just stopped. I would come to my grandmother's house and she was 75, and she'd literally be sitting there with a paint of Parmesan, drinking it straight out the bottle. And she was healthy as anybody, but that was the way they dealt with things, right? And my father's side, I would say that it was a little more different. It was dealt with everybody wasn't pretty much the same over there, but it just like I had one uncle who was really just, he was in the church. He was a good guy. He's been married to his wife the whole time. Yeah. Then I had some uncles that were, I had actually 3 uncles on my dad's side that, got into drugs. And so I think to answer the question is it was either alcohol or drugs, which I saw what drugs did, so I didn't want to go that route. But drinking was something that felt like it was more social than anything. Yeah. And once I got into that, it was, it's cool. You're hanging out, you're drinking and whatever. But then when you start having like real like life issues and you're leaning into that to cope with it, it just got to the point where you're not making sound decisions. You're just doing things. You're not dealing with things. You're just kind of skimming over them and just trying to go on through life. But after you sober up, the problems are still there. Yeah. Right. So, but that was the way that I saw my parents deal with it. And then as far as like family wise, I could say that what I learned about my mother to this day and what I'm learning about myself is that we all have an inner child inside, right? There's that. And then I had to really sit back and peel back the layers and look at my mom and go, I don't know what she went through with her family dynamic, right? So I can't blame her for the way she handled things with us, right? And then my dad, I don't really know what he went through, right? So I can't really fault him for how he moves, right? But I think that it's up to me to break the generational curse, right? Right. But we never talked about religion.
Right.
You know, we didn't have like, you know, a dinner, everybody sits down and shares what's going on in their life. We didn't talk about conflict resolution.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't deal with issues. Like if there was a problem, you know, in the Black community, it's like mom's the word.
Mm-hmm.
Like you don't talk
Right.
about if it's a financial issue, nobody's gonna talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
If it's somebody sick, you know, they're just sick, and that's just that. You know, because now you're thinking about who's gonna pay the doctor bill. We don't got no insurance and all these different things. So you don't really bring stuff up. It's just like, you know, it's crazy because it's almost like you don't say it because you don't want to take ownership for it. Right? So you just kind of like act like it never happened. But the craziest thing is, I don't think I learned anything from my parents about how to deal with pretty much anything. We never had the conversations. So I didn't learn a lot from that family dynamic. What I learned from was my uncle,
Okay.
who's
Okay.
still married, still with his wife to this day. They
Okay.
probably been married for 40 years. But I learned he seemed like he knew what he was doing because he was calm, he was poised, he was assertive, and he was always like the anchor. And he was the one that had least stress, least issues, good family. Both his kids, you know, grew up to be great, and they just had this perfect family dynamic. And that's what I always looked at and said, okay, I'm gonna learn from how he moves and, you know, go from there, because I didn't really, you gotta really think about it, Dave. Like, the only thing we had that was an example of a family was the Cosbys. You know what I'm saying? Like, that was it in good times.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That was it. That's the only thing we really had to kind of pull from.
Yeah.
But I didn't learn a lot. But interestingly enough, I want to ask you the same question. Like, what do you feel like you learned from your family dynamic?
Well, you know, there's a thing called epigenetics where,
Okay.
you know, that they say just like physical characteristics can be carried on in your genes, you know, from generation to generation, so can traumas.
Right.
And so, you know, I think I learned that there is these like consistent traumas that seem to be happening, and also the habits and rhythms of how generations dealt with it. And so within my family line, going back to Korea, and then my dad in the Midwest in Michigan, Missouri, they both came from abject poverty, you know,
Right.
complete poverty.
Right.
And on my mom's side, I found out there was like alcoholism.
Oh, wow.
And so her dad was abusive and beat her mom, and my mom ran away when she was a young girl. And so I was looking at that pattern. You know, one was alcohol. Number two was running away from things. And that's kind of me. Like, I don't necessarily, I mean, not necessarily physically run away from situations,
Right.
but I can mentally cut a person off. Like, I'm gone. And so I think that was something. So we didn't talk about stuff either. That's why, for me, I think what was generational was a pattern and culture of hiddenness and keeping things buried. And Asian cultures, they call it like a shame-based culture. So we don't bring up anything that may cause shame on somebody or on ourselves, our family. And so there's so many secrets. So I think there are generational secrets that I think at some point, I don't know if you're an empath or if a person becomes really super sensitive, but I see it even with my children. Some can talk about it more, others can't. And I think I was at the point where I was holding it in, and then I couldn't keep holding it in.
Right.
And I think where the wreckage was coming out was in the relationships of my life. And so I didn't know how to deal with my dad when he had the affair with with somebody else and hurt my mom and devastate our family. I didn't know how to deal with that, but just cut him off. Say, you're done, man.
I did the same thing.
Yeah, I just got so angry at him. And so I think that was a pattern. And then there's something happened, I think, in response to that too. And I'd be interested to hear how you dealt with it, because I think, you know, we become defensive or protective because we're trying to survive, and no one taught us what to do with all that stuff. And so for me, I think I would cut a person off and then not deal with it But then when I got married and I had significant relationships, if they hurt me, it led me to great disappointment.
Right.
And it's almost like, I can't believe you're doing this.
Mm-hmm.
Not even thinking that I probably do the same thing.
Right. That's crazy.
But
Right.
I fill up these walls and
Right.
think, I can't believe you're doing this in my
Right.
mind's eye. And I remember my wife telling me, I confronted her one time. I said, I can't believe you're doing this. You know, it's like, we talked about this, you're still doing it. And then I started thinking about her motives, like, because I'm pretty deep. I'll start thinking about, okay, why did she do that? You know, and I said, I can't believe you did this, and it's probably because of this. And then she started crying, and she was, you know, because she's really calm, objective. And she goes, Dave, why can't you think the best of me? Why do you always have to think the worst of me? And I could see that, you know, I think that's part of my emotional state from the trauma, that I can go from 0 to 100 emotionally.
Right.
And then I cut off and I don't deal with it. And I realized, man, I think I developed a habit of almost unrealistic expectations of people, where, you know, I'm expecting like someone who especially says they love me,
Right.
that they should know better.
Right.
And they have to be perfect almost. And so I had to really change in terms of my mindset of having realistic expectations of people. That, you know, every one of us is flawed. At some point, we're probably going to hurt one another.
Right.
But the beauty of it all is if you can work through it, your friendship can grow deeper.
Right.
Your partnership can go deeper.
Right.
And that's something I didn't have the patience for or the understanding.
Yeah, for me, I mean, it's crazy you say that, because that was my superpower, like cutting people off.
Okay.
I wake up, I'm like, I'm done. Don't even. But I started to realize that over time, because like, and we talk about it all the time, it's just like, now I'll ask the question, you know, I'll have the conversation. I'm still working on it. You know what I'm saying?
Right,
But
right.
I'll at least have the conversation so that I can understand, rather than, because, you know, your life is only so long. You're only going to have so many special people in your life. And sometimes people might be reacting out of scarcity. They might be doing things because of a particular reason you might not understand.
Yeah.
But if you maybe understand it, you might be have some empathy there.
Yeah.
But then if you just cut somebody off, and like, I could know somebody 20, 30 years. I mean, 10, it's like, oh, it's a wrap. You know what I'm saying? And I would literally have this energy when I walked around, that if I cut somebody off and I would see them, like my aura around them, you can tell that I'm not right. You can just feel it, right?
Yeah.
And I went on for years like that, and I started to really realize, once I started to like look inward, that I do a lot of the stuff that I'm cutting them off for to other people.
Sure.
Right?
Right.
And it's just like, you know what I mean? So I'm like,
Yeah.
and then I had to really, like, you know, take a look at it and say, okay, well, look at yourself.
Right.
And Robert Greene, we had a conversation one day. We was talking about my son, and I was just telling him different things going on. And he looked at me. He said, he said, won't you just try putting yourself in his shoes and feel what he's feeling for a minute. And I took that advice, and it absolutely worked, because I've been my son's age before. I've been through things. I've been rebellious with my parents. I went out and did things on my own. I jumped in the streets. You know, my mom didn't want me in the streets, but I'm like, I'm going here because this is where I want to be. And I'm quite sure, you know, she could have cut me off too, but she didn't choose to do so. And I do that now with people, you know, more so, at least I try.
Right. Right.
You know what I mean? Because it's just like, why did this person do this? And it's something that triggers me, right? Because I'm going to keep it 1,000. I mean, I'm 46. Until I was 45 and a half, I had trust issues. You know what I'm saying? I was like, I'm not trusting the soul, because that's why.
Yeah.
And then when they do something, he's like, I can't see. I know I couldn't trust you. But sometimes it ain't even that deep.
Yeah.
They're being human beings.
Right.
Nobody's perfect. Neither am I. You know, and this is like, I've done things to people that I felt like, you know, that was beneficial for me, because I felt like I needed to survive. And I'm quite sure, you know, these people feel like I probably hurt them at some point.
Right.
Right. But then now I'm going out here acting like, you know, I ain't never hurt nobody.
Right.
And, you know, you're so wrong for doing this to me. And the relationships that you can salvage, you can, and it's crazy because you're talking about your dad. I had the same issue with my father because when my parents split, I didn't understand why.
Okay.
So I'm thinking it's him.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? But it wasn't.
It's both. Or...
Right, both, right. And when it was all said and done, I had a bunch of resentment because I had to go live in this single wide trailer, you know, my mom, my sister, and we was used to traveling the world and doing all these things. And now I got to be the man of the house. So I'm looking at it like it's him.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And the whole time I built this resentment, which was helped me in the streets because I'm like, I got to survive. I got to take care of everybody. I got to put my sister through college. I got to buy my mom a house. All these things I did.
Yeah.
But with that resentment that I'm going to be the man and that you didn't do these things for me. And fast forward to this day, man, my dad had the best relationship in the world.
Right.
Right? Because we was able to have like some real conversations and I was able to understand why he did what he did, and the changes he went through and what he sacrificed to make sure that we were straight and all these different things. And I'm like, wow, like you are, you know, you're a human being. Of course you're flawed, but you're a great man.
Right.
So I got to at least commend you for that. And we have realistic, real live conversations now that are like open. And it's just like, you know, I probably my whole, maybe since I was 10, I probably ain't tell my dad I love him, like until like recently. You know what I'm saying? I ain't like, no, Pops. But I was in a place where I just feel like I couldn't say those words to him, right?
Sure.
But then when I started to do work, you know, on myself and just start to understand, like, you're flawed too. You got things, like I got a son. I'm quite sure he, you know, he feels a way sometimes about things, but I don't want him to resent me forever.
Yeah.
So it's like now I got to have these conversations, but it's coming from my trauma because I had all these things happen to me in my upbringing and I felt like I couldn't trust people. So now you're bringing that in your adulthood and then you're putting that in your real life relationships, right? That takes you time to build. So it's almost like, you know, it's almost like you paid your mortgage for 20 years and then you're late one time and they tell you gotta get out. You know what I'm saying? Like you gotta get out.
Right.
You know, so.
Wow. You know, you said something significant to me was you said you realized like he was human as you listened to his story. So that was awesome to me that first you're just taking the time to hear his story. And then you see that he's human. That's your conclusion. I remember I had a therapist or a consultant, you know, he knew that I had struggles with my dad. And so he asked me a question. He goes, hey, what's your dad's first name? I said, his name's Gary. And as soon as I said it, I said, dang it. He's just Gary. He's Gary. Like a little kid Gary. Not just dad superhero. And again, it was my expectation thing again. And it made him human to me. But also, as you were speaking, I was thinking about that emotions, because we're both, I think, emotional. You know, all of us are, you know, and we're objective too. But when emotion starts to rise up in us, I think it's primal as a human to respond to that, because it's like whether it's evolution or God, whatever a person believes, you know, it's set where your body starts to have less oxygen to your brain. They say normally your brain takes around 35% oxygen levels. But then when you're under stress or anxiety or fear, it goes to 5% oxygen.
So is that why you can't think clearly?
Exactly. Because it's being redirected to arms and legs, you know, to fight or to run. And so that's a human, physical, normal response. So I tell people that's for your protection. It's there so you're safe, but we don't know how to monitor that, or we don't even know what's going on usually. And then if it's going on, how do you change that? And so I remember my feelings were so great, I couldn't overcome them, it seemed sometimes. Where again, I would cut off relationship or run away. And there was a moment where I was walking across a football field when I was going to university. It was I think around my third year of school. And I don't have these moments often, and I don't want people to think I'm like super spiritual at all. But I felt I heard a voice, and I heard, you need to forgive your father. I immediately responded, acting like it was normal, because because again, I'm reacting right away. I said, I can't.
Right.
You know, I just realized I can't, man. I go, it wouldn't be honest.
Right,
You know,
right.
it just wouldn't be honest
Right.
because I have no feelings for my dad.
Right.
And then I heard this. Well, do you think my son felt like going to the cross?
Mm,
I said, shoot.
yeah.
I go, I remember there was like this moment where I think Jesus said something like, let this cup pass from me. Make the cup representing the suffering and the crucifixion and all that. He says, you know, if it's possible, let it pass. He didn't want to do it, but then he did it.
Did it.
I said, you know what? There's some things in life you just have to do because it's right.
Right.
You don't feel like it. It's kind of like, I guess, a mom when the baby's crying at 2 a.m. in the morning, or the dad, you have to get up, take care of that kid. And it's just what's right to do. And that was a value shift. I remember as a college student. So, you know what? That's an adult. You know, it's a mature person who you don't want to do some things, but you do what's right because you have to do it. And so I remember calling my dad right away.
Right.
And he was shocked. And I said, I think he was ready for me to just kind of lambast him and have this fury towards him. And he said, why are you calling? I said, well, I need to see you and your new wife, what he had an affair with.
Oh, wow.
And they were shocked. And I said, yeah, I need to talk to you. So I met with him in Arizona, and he was ready, I'm sure, for this like venom to come out. But I said, hey, listen, I just need to say I'm sorry.
Right.
I wasn't a very good son.
That's deep.
Would you please forgive me?
Wow.
And then I looked at his new wife, who I'd never wanted to talk to and didn't talk to. And I said, I need to ask you for forgiveness too. I haven't treated you very well.
Wow.
And my dad just started crying.
Wow.
And he said, will you forgive me?
Mm.
And I like to tell people, at that moment, like all these emotions came from my father. But to be frank and honest, I didn't have any emotion for him still. It took like 5 years after I committed to seeing him or talking to him at least once a month that I started feeling feelings for my dad.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I learned a big lesson that, just do what's right sometimes. You're not going to feel it, but you do what's right and then be consistent with it. Because a lot of things is about habit and sustainability. You keep hitting something, or like the water keeps falling on the rock.
Right.
Eventually, you can break the rock.
And it's crazy too, because I think that's the signs of a great leader, because people think that leaders are like tough and they gotta just, put the foot down and yell and scream, and he's like, okay, he's a great leader.
Right.
But sometimes being a great leader is being the person that reaches out first and apologizes, or the person that even just reaches out and opens up the dialogue. And it was my stepmother. She called me one day. She was like, your dad's getting older. Like, you really need to talk to him. And I was just like, yeah, whatever. And, I'm doing my JEEZY thing, and I'm just like, yo, like, it was the same thing. It's like, I just need to talk to him. And the first conversation we had, it was like, I just understood that he went through it.
Yes.
Right. And he made decisions, and he did what he thought was best for everyone. Right. Like, my dad was literally like, he was in the Marines and still working at a 7-Eleven, and then had another job just to make everything right, because he gave my mom his pension. You know what I'm saying? And I'm like, you gave her what? So he was just doing all these things just to be, a great father. But that made me understand that it wasn't like he did something that was just beneficial for him and he just left, right? So now it's just like, he still had our best interests. So I got to look at him for what it is. It's just like, he's still an admirable guy. Like, he's still a good person. They just went through the thing. And now, in the first initial conversation, you're right, it didn't just go like we're good. But over time, even when I was going through a lot of my personal stuff, like, he would just find ways to kind of get around me, and I would just be like, you know what I'm saying? Like, wow, like, he's really here for me.
Yeah.
And he'll call me about certain things. Like, I remember one day he called me. He was like, hey, man, why you telling these people you dropped out of school in 6th grade? I was like, I did, right? He's like, no, the 9th. I'm just like, okay. He's like, you got me looking crazy out here. And I'm just like, oh, my bad. You know what I mean? I forgot. It's been so long. But he cares.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He's calling to make sure I'm great, and he checks in. And to me, I think that's, that's the biggest piece. It's just like, and even I got friends that I had to go in and forgive, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then understand that they're in a different season of their lives right now.
Mm-hmm.
And even though we don't have to hang out, we don't have to be around each other every day, just to know that energy is no longer over us, because I'm a different person too.
Mm-hmm.
Because there was a time that I was running around terrorizing things.
Yeah,
You
right,
know what I mean?
right.
And people would literally see me, up until a few years ago, I'd be like, oh my, because it's almost like my energy was so different then. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So it was almost like people thought I was coming with the aggression, and then when I see, I'm like, hey, how you doing, man? How's everything? How's your wife and your kids? They're looking at you like, is
Yeah.
he high?
Yeah.
Because you're so different. But it took, just the inward work and leaning into the pain, I would think, for sure, which is a big one. I mean, it's not a good place to sit. It's not a good place to be. But the only way around it is through it, right? And this is like, people don't want to hear that. I didn't want to hear that. I don't want to hear that, like, you got to sit with this and let it hurt and burn, and then, you come out on the other side as a better person,
Okay, so we talked about our dads,
Right.
but I know your dad.
Mhm.
You have
You got to
beautiful
meet my
children.
dad too, though.
I can't wait to
Yeah,
see. I saw some pictures of him. We were together
Yeah.
a few times ago. But I was wondering, like, what are you doing now to be
Mm.
the father, the man for your children? What are the
Wow.
habits, rhythms you're trying to pursue?
I mean, for one, is being present, right? And then, and we talked about this before too. It was like, I love my son.
Mm-hmm.
I got my girls.
Mm-hmm.
The thing, the key, the biggest key part for me was learning how to take the walls down
Mm-hmm.
so that I can feel their love and give them mine.
Mm-hmm.
That was a big process for me. That's been like the last couple of years. And it's like, I would literally be on the plane, like flying,
Yeah.
and I'm sitting there going through every picture the last time we was together, just like smiling and
Oh,
like the moments, and it's just like,
that's fantastic.
yeah, it's just like it's a different feeling. I can't even front, because I was in my own way,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And now it's just like being present, having the conversations,
Yeah.
taking in the little moments.
Yeah.
Like I was my youngest daughter, she was we came back from a family trip and was in different time zones. And so when we got back, she was staying up late every night.
Okay.
And I stayed up with her a couple of nights, and the next night I stayed up with her till like 5 a.m. because she would not go to sleep. And and then I just looked at her, I said, you know what, you're gonna have to just cry. You know what I'm saying? And I said, because I'm going to sleep. I got to get up in an hour. And she looked at me, she said, you want to go to timeout? And I just, and my heart just was like, I just looked at her, I said, baby, you are crazy. But it's just those moments, you know what I'm saying? Even like for me, being a girl dad,
Yeah.
very protective.
Sure.
And I just try to make sure I have open dialogue and let them know that I'm always here for them. And I try to do things to show them that if whenever you get to the point of your life, if the men around you aren't treating you like I am,
Yes.
then
Exactly.
you already, because I'm gonna treat you the way you're supposed. I'm gonna talk to you the way you're supposed to be talked to. I'm gonna do things for you. I'm gonna always have your back. I'm always protect you. I'm always give you my insight. Because I ask my kids all day, like, what did you feel at today? And they're like, oh, Dad, I was trying to, my oldest daughter, I was trying to meet a new friend and this happened. I was like, okay, well, now you learn. You got the data. What are you going to do with that? They're just getting them used to being able to fail and fail often, because that was something I feared to help me back, because I didn't take a lot of risk because I was afraid to fail.
Yes.
Well, you should be open to failing, because that's when you learn. So it's been, I can't front, Dave, like it's been really, it's been my source of happiness. Like people seeing me and like, why you so happy? It's like, it's my kids.
Yeah,
It's just like, I love them. Like, it's like, I just love it. Like, pick them up from school, take them to school, whatever it is. Like, I'm looking forward to it. Like waking them up in the morning, like I love it. I come in here like the big bad wolf.
Come on.
Like, it's time.
Yeah.
You got 10 minutes, brush your teeth. Let's get it together, baby.
I love it, man.
Yeah.
I know you're a great dad.
Thank you, brother.
I've seen you with your kids. You know, they say all healthy relationships have to have at least 3 components.
Okay.
You know, it's asking, receiving, and giving.
Right.
You know, the greatest joy can be in giving and love, you know.
Right.
They say that there's a transition from when you're a child to becoming an adult, that you go from like this stage of give me all the time to say, you know, giving away, where you start to bless them.
Right.
And, you know, blessing, when I studied this word and this concept through history, especially in like the sacred history of what we know from the scriptures, blessing has 4 components.
Okay.
It's you see a person, you know who they are, you affirm their uniqueness, and then you give them access to capital or resources.
Wow.
See, know, affirm, and give. And that's when you bless a person.
Right.
It's not just abstract thing, I'll bless you. It's actually work. And it's being fully present where I can see who you are. I'm looking at you. I know your story.
Okay.
I affirm your uniqueness. And I give you anything I can to help you achieve your dreams.
Wow. And
So
that's it. That's the cycle.
That's a cycle. And that's our calling, I feel, as humans, that we do that with one another. And I've seen you do that. You know, I've seen your generosity.
I'm still working on receiving though.
Yeah,
it's hard.
It's hard.
Yeah, it's hard.
Well, you know, you had to survive. So, but now you're thriving. I've seen you grow a lot.
It's when people like do stuff for me, I kind of be like, why are you doing that? You know, but I'm getting better.
Yeah,
I'm getting better.
You are getting better.
I want to congratulate you too on your release of your book.
Yeah.
The Shape of My Eyes. I think everybody should grab a copy. And it's like, I've been knowing you for a few years now, but it's really cool to like get to know the layers.
Yeah.
You know, and I think the only thing we didn't talk about that I found unique, and you said it in the introduction, was the I forget the word you call it. It's the it's when you're in this, when somebody close to you is in a state of trauma and it transfers to you.
Oh, vicarious trauma.
Vicarious trauma.
Yeah, where you can get, like, they say up to like 30, 35% of a person's trauma if they're just sharing it with you.
Right. Right. And I had a lot of vicarious trauma.
Yes, you have.
So I said you had too.
Yes, you have.
And you know, definitely it's been a year since my my memoir came out.
Yeah.
It's one of those things, like I really wrote it from an honest place.
Yeah.
And to this day, when I see people like, and they go, hey man, I read your book. And it's just like, wow, you know, and it's like, and then they tell you some takeaways that they got from it.
Yeah.
And I think that that's special, man. And I just think that it's bigger than just music. It's like your life and you're sharing it with someone.
Yes.
So I want to commend you and thank you for sharing your life with us.
Thank you,
know,
brother.
And I hope everybody grab a copy.
Thank you for that.
For sure. What takeaways and what people want to know about your memoir and your life?
Yeah. You know, I wrote The Shape of My Eyes because of the secrets I've discovered that I didn't know about, of course. And it all happened that one time when I found my mom in a truck that she had bought my father. It was an SUV. I came home as a 15-year-old and saw that she had a knife in her hand and she started ripping the seats apart. And she locked herself in the car. And she was just weeping. Mascara was running down her cheeks. Police cars converged upon our house. We were in like an upper middle class neighborhood. I had no idea what was going on. And then when she finally got out of the car, you know, she looked at me and said, you know, your father had an affair. And that wreaked havoc in my life. They say divorce is like a trauma.
Right.
And especially if you're a child.
Right.
And so I discovered there was not only the secret of my dad having an affair, but as I dove into it, there are more secrets. And so the book I wrote was trying to discover what's really happening in my family. And then really, who am I? Am I Korean? Am I American? So I literally went back to Korea, traveled throughout Asia, and trying to figure out my roots.
Wow.
And then also I tried to figure out about my father being from America. And I wrote about the story, about how I dealt with my brokenness and the brokenness of my family, but also found a lot of beauty and hope and healing.
Right.
That's amazing. And one more takeaway too, like, I really commend you on just the work that you do, you know, and like you're like a modern day, like, saint, like you're moving around the world, like really building with people. And I commend you because, again, when you was talking about the vicarious trauma, it was like some of the situations you were describing and the way you're showing up for people to be there in some of their most, like, you know, you was describing these situations, and I couldn't imagine nothing like that. So for you to show up and be brave and be there to help and support and help people work through this, I commend you on that. And it's just like, I think everybody that gets the book will understand that we all got a story, and it's always something that we're always searching for. And that's the beauty of taking the time to reflect on what you've been through in your life, because that's going to help someone else. And I'm quite sure your book is going to help a lot of people.
Thanks, Jay.
So thank you.